All right, everybody, it's time that we talk about the Peter Thiel and Ross...
Our guest is Ross
Douthat interview. Hopefully that guy from 16 years ago said it right. Peter Thiel is one of the great philosophical thinkers of our time with the slight handicap of being a billionaire.
Despite the slight handicap of being a billionaire, there's a good case that he's the most influential right-wing intellectual of the last 20 years.
And the interviewer, according to this Christian YouTuber, is the greatest columnist in the world.
Ross is arguably the best columnist in the world. He has many excellent books, and he has a new book, which I'm a big fan of, called Believe, Why Everyone Should Be Religious.
There's one clip in particular that has gone viral because of this interview. Let's watch it now.
I think you would prefer the human race to endure, right? You're hesitating.
Yeah, well,
Yes?
I don't know. I would.
This is a long hesitation. This is a long hesitation.
There's so many questions implicit in this.
Should the human race survive?
Yes.
Okay.
But
that doesn't sound good. I wanted to watch the video to get the context behind that clip, and you know what? I did. For example, one piece of context I didn't know before I started watching this is that Ross is actually a fanboy of Peter Thiel. His words, although you won't find those words in this interview, you gotta go back in the archives.
I am actually a fanboy when it comes to the two gentlemen who I will be moderating a conversation between tonight.
But I'm getting ahead of myself. We have to talk about the conceit. There's a conceit to this video, a fun little twist. When's the last time you watched a video with a good conceit? I watched this interview after taking an edible. An edible what? I won't say. And it had me feeling in a certain state of mind, and I figured it was finally time for me to watch this interview I've been putting off. I grabbed a nearby blank composition notebook because there was one nearby. Why did you have that lying around? For just such an occasion. And look at all these notes. I was still feeling the energy, so I figured I would share my notes with you. And the conceit of the video is that I have to do the whole thing before the magic wears off. Hubris, you say? I don't know, because I watched this conversation.
I think the word nature does not occur once in the Old Testament. And so, and there is a word in which, a sense in which, the way I understand,
If they're allowed to record and release this on purpose, then I'm going to record and release this with no apologies. So I don't have a script, I've got these notes, and a lot of thoughts and feelings. Okay, so I think I'm probably going to be pretty mean to Ross in this video. Spoiler alert for my notes. Ross has one unambiguously great moment in this interview. He asks a great question that I think is an important question, and I'm glad he asked it. But
you're an investor in AI. You're deeply invested in Palantir, in military technology, in technologies of surveillance, in technologies of warfare, and so on, right? And it just seems to me that when you tell me a story about the Antichrist coming to power and using the fear of technological change to sort of impose order on the world, I feel like that Antichrist would maybe be using the tools that you were building, right? Like, wouldn't the Antichrist be like, great, we're not going to have any more technological progress, but I really like what Palantir has done so far, right?
Yeah,
I mean, isn't that a concern? Wouldn't that be the irony of history would be that the man publicly worrying about the Antichrist accidentally hastens his or her arrival?
Wow, what a great question. I mean, how is he going to weasel his way out of this one?
There are all these different scenario. I obviously don't think that that's what I'm doing.
To be clear, I don't think that's what you're doing either.
He just lets him get past it. Ross just lets him off the hook. He's just like, oh no, I don't think that. Let's move on. So Ross's best moment is almost letting a great interview moment happen. So, almost great job. I almost think you're smart, Ross. And if you made it this far, I thank you, because I think we actually have some important things to discuss here. I had two takeaways from this interview, one that is important and one that is not. The unimportant thing, but it ties in, is that Peter Thiel said a lot of the same stuff on the Joe Rogan podcast when he was on recently. I knew this because I made this weird edit a few months ago.
I think Joe Rogan sucks cock.
I think you're right.
And so I immediately picked up on him saying Malthusian.
Sociopathic Malthusian. Malthusian calculus is the sort of Malthusian.
This is a rerun, Pete. I thought about looking up Malthusian, and I decided, no, I'm not going to do it. I didn't really feel like it, so tell me in the comments if you know what that means. Him talking about tech stagnation.
This generalized sense of stagnation.
Tech stagnation.
Reputation.
Meditation.
Tech stagnation is kind of his whole thing, though. And what does that mean? Oh, we're going to talk about it. My favorite is the world of bits.
You know, I always made an exception for the world of bits.
And there has been a lot of progress in the world of bits. Cone, a very intense progress around the world of bits.
Not just about this world of bits.
Yeah, the world of bits thing is actually going to matter, because for all of this fancy science talk that this guy's doing, my big takeaway, the thing that actually matters, is that Peter Thiel does not believe in science. Because Peter Thiel is a tech bro, he is kind of lumped in with these scientifically minded guys. But he just isn't, and you know that by the way he's introduced on this show.
Why is one of the world's most successful investors worrying about the Antichrist?
One of the world's most successful investors. So he had this great job where he gave people some money, and then they had to pay him some money, and he would get a lot of money. And he's also the co-founder of PayPal and Palantir.
My guest today is the co-founder of PayPal and Palantir, and an early investor in the political careers of Donald Trump and J.D. Vance.
Palantir is a lot of things, but most interesting for us today, perhaps, is that it is a weapons manufacturer and is building a mass surveillance system and currently has multi-million-dollar contracts with the U.S. government.
The Trump administration has tapped Palantir, the data mining company founded by the billionaire tech investor Peter Thiel, to compile data on people in the United States for a master database, including a new $30 million contract with ICE.
These are the kind of things that I might have brought up if I was introducing Peter Thiel onto my show, and he is, of course, welcome at any time.
You're very welcome. Thanks for being here.
He's well known for funding a range of conservative and contrarian stuff.
Well known for funding a range of conservative and simply contrarian ideas.
What would it even mean to fund contrarian ideas? Oh, wait, is he talking about Project 2025? I mean, it is contrary to what I think a good society would be, but it's pretty much just fascism wrapped up in the American flag, with a healthy dollop of Christian nationalism, just like Peter Thiel. And Mr. Thiel will opine on all kinds of things that sound scientific and smart.
Malthusian.
But Peter Thiel does not actually believe in science. Another thing I learned in the Joe Rogan interview.
You don't feel that climate science is a real science?
It is
The most influential right-wing intellectual of the last 20 years.
There's several different things one could say.
Not great. Now, if you're in a situation in life where you're relying on me to prove climate change is real, you have more problems on your plate than I can deal with right now. I'm going to assume if you've watched this far that we're on the same page about climate change being real. And me personally, if I was a real smart intellectual type who looked like Audrey's husband from Twin Peaks: The Return, I might bring up the fact that in the most famous podcasts in the world, Peter Thiel would not commit to believing in climate change. Big news considering this guy's importance to the future of the climate. Ross just obscures all of this using buzzwords that don't really mean anything the more you think about him.
Peter Thiel is the original tech-right power player.
He's the original tech-right power player. This requires a definition of original, tech-right, and power player for me to fully understand. You know, all really Ross has told us is that this is a really rich, important guy who's really smart, and you should listen to what he says. And we're going to be talking about vague words a lot, and science is a vague word, the way we refer to it colloquially. The digital revolution made Peter Thiel a success.
A Silicon Valley insider who had gotten rich in the digital revolution.
But that's obviously a totally different field of science than chemistry and biology and medicine. But Peter Thiel will confidently talk about all these things at great length to the detriment of humanity.
People are completely stuck on beta amyloids. It's obviously not working. It's just some kind of a stupid racket.
As Angela Collier has talked about on her channel, and I do hope I'm saying her name right, all these billionaires want to be seen as genius quantum physicists. They have the most money. That means they have the most brain points, which means they should be able to talk about the most subjects. But what is Peter Thiel actually good at? Investing in stuff. Describe the talent that it takes to do that.
So do you feel like you, as an investor, as a venture capitalist, got anything out of the first Trump term? Like, what did Trump do in his first term that you felt was anti-decadent or anti-stagnation? If anything, maybe the answer is nothing.
Well, I've
talked about a lot of propaganda on this channel, and I'm not saying that this video is propaganda yet, but one important thing they do is they frame the questions that they want you to be asking. Propaganda is a value-neutral term, of course, but I guess I'm just saying the questions he asks are interesting.
Is Silicon Valley recklessly ambitious? What should we fear more, Armageddon or stagnation? Why is one of the world's most successful investors worrying about the Antichrist?
Is Silicon Valley recklessly ambitious? That's a good question. I'm interested in hearing the answer to that. It would be a shame if he never asks it. 2. What should we fear more, Armageddon or stagnation? Now that seems like a false choice there. Or maybe he's saying between those two things, what should we fear more? What should we be most fearful of, Peter Thiel? Now Armageddon is a completely made-up concept, a religious concept really, and stagnation, I guess we'll have to find out what that means. But if we're just going by a layman's definition, I would say that Armageddon is more scary. I mean, I have a lot of childhood trauma from worrying about Armageddon. I never once stayed up at night tossing and turning and worried about tech stagnation. But maybe that's just because Peter Thiel hadn't scared me yet.
Why is one of the world's most successful investors worrying about the Antichrist?
I love this because I think it starts to ask a larger question, which is why are we listening to investors at all? You might be hearing my cat Bo in the background playing around. I don't control him. Why do we care about what successful investors worry about? Well, it's because of all the reasons that he's not talking about. Why is one of the most powerful men in the world, who funded the president and the vice president and his entire legislation, who develops weapons and security shit and spy shit for the fucking government, man? Why is a guy like that worrying about the Antichrist? What, is he some kind of fucking crazy person? That scares me more than Armageddon and stagnation combined. But I think it's very important for Ross Douthat to not frame it that way, to not frame it as Peter Thiel being a scary guy. Part of that is just he wants to have more powerful people on his podcast, and he wants to be nice. Ross Douthat is a conservative. I don't know if he does have disagreements with Peter Thiel. He doesn't voice them here, although he does push back on him at certain points or ask him to clarify. But at the end of the day, I think it's because Ross Douthat feels very much at home in the kind of world that Peter Thiel wants to build. But I'm straying from my notes. I believe that this is the New York Times' official office. Not sure if they went to Peter Thiel for this. I'll have to check. But it seems rather mean to me that Ross Douthat is given this chair where his feet do not touch the ground. Now, I am not tall. I am short. I am 5'6". I know I probably should have told you earlier, but I was worried you wouldn't talk to me because of the height thing. I don't know. I get in my head about it. Actually, what's Ross doing with his leg? Is he sitting his leg up on the arm of the thing? Why is he doing that? Peter Thiel, and I've never said this before, is sitting in that chair like a person. Ross Douthat, I don't know if he has some kind of inguinal hernia or a hemorrhoid that he's trying to sit around. No judgment, we all have our problems. But I feel like he's going for a chill bro vibe. I mean, I'm not a body language expert, and they're not real, actually. And I shouldn't have said that mean thing about the hemorrhoid, because actually that could be true. And, you know, Ross, you're welcome to come on here anytime and defend your lousy fucking unacceptable performance in this dog shit piece of propaganda that you spewed out of your hemorrhoid butt. This took an unfortunate turn. Now I'm afraid we must talk about stagnation and whatever this means. Its meaning is going to shift or become complicated throughout this discussion.
So I want to start by taking you back in time, about 13 or 14 years. You wrote an essay for National Review, the conservative magazine, called The End of the Future. Basically, the argument in that essay was that the dynamic, fast-paced, ever-changing modern world was just not nearly as dynamic as people thought, and that actually we'd entered a period of technological stagnation. So I'm curious, in 2025, right, do you think that diagnosis still holds?
Yes, I still broadly believe in the stagnation thesis.
So this is Peter Thiel's biggest fear. He wrote a thing about it, and he's remembering it all these years later, Ross Douthat. So it must be really important. But it's basically just him asking, like, hey, why don't we live in the Jetsons like I thought we were going to when I was a kid?
I was born in 1967, often express frustration that stuck in these office buildings or houses that are decades old, all these parts of our society that feel lame, slow changing, low energy, low testosterone, nothing is going on. You know, I do wonder if we were in a Jetsons type world, we might not even be sitting here to talk about it.
Yeah, he sometimes just does talk about the Jetsons. We used to have all this progress. We were zooming along, and then we hit a plateau. Now, what I was thinking when he was saying this was like, but what about the internet and computers and now AI? What about the many, many advancements in medicine, medical technology, vaccinations? Well, maybe that's a sensitive subject. And the way that he gets around it is he just cheats and says, well, that doesn't count.
The ships were faster, the railroads were faster, the cars were faster, the planes were faster. It culminates in the Concorde and the Apollo missions, and then that in all sorts of dimensions, things had slowed. There was, I always made an exception for the world of bits. So we had, computers and software and internet and mobile internet, and then, the last 10, 15 years, you had crypto and the AI revolution, which I think is in some sense pretty big. But
this lies in the world of bits, and he's always made an exception for the world of bits.
Okay, so the woke AI. Artificial intelligence seems like one, if we're still stagnant, it's the biggest exception to stagnation.
Yes.
It's the place where there's been...
Yes.
More like cheater, Thiel. If you exclude all of the advancement that we've made in the past 20 years, we haven't really made any advancements in the last 20 years. I think that Peter Thiel may just be out of touch. Like, he's still talking about string theory.
Can you say that we're not making progress in physics unless you've devoted half your life to studying string theory? Or
progress in cancer count versus string theory.
String theory is kind of old news, but this seems to be his most modern reference point. At various points in this interview, he'll give different years for when society started to collapse 50 years ago.
The entire world has submitted for 50 years to peace and safetyism.
Back in the 70s, the hippies won.
No, but my telling of the history of the 1970s is the hippies did win.
But 200 years is quite a specific number.
And when that expectation collapses, we no longer have a middle class society. And maybe there's some way you can have a feudal society in which things are always static and stuck. Maybe there's some way you can shift to some radically different society, but it's not the way the Western world, it's not the way the United States has functioned for, the first 200 years of its existence.
We are approaching, ironically, the 250th anniversary of the United States democracy, whatever, just in time for the season finale. Now, we're under a time crunch because of the conceit. I can't get into this too much, but the Project 2025 project is to return to basically a pre-amendment form of the Constitution, where only white landowners could have any political power, and also they could own slaves. Women would have fewer rights. Black people would be more like 3/5 of people. So on one hand, we need to get back to the future.
But I think, if we don't find a way back to the future, I do think the society, I don't know, it unravels.
But to Peter Thiel, the future looks a lot like 200 years ago, when, ironically, he would have been stoned to death for being gay. It's quite lucky for Peter Thiel that all these other people built a society that allowed for him to thrive and reach this point in life, isn't it? I think it speaks to the fact that these guys are just bored. They're just bored rich guys with too much time on their fucking hands to worry about dumb shit that they make up in their stupid heads. Like that one clip I showed, he's just sad that he has to be in rooms that aren't futuristic. Like, oh, that must be super fucking hard for him. And he literally says at one point, nothing's happening.
Lame, slow changing, low energy, low testosterone, nothing is going on.
Shit's happening constantly. Your life is just boring and lame. Like, why is this guy making it our fault that his life is shitty? This guy had everything and he's still miserable. But here's where I have to start talking about my politics. I'm sorry. It annoys some people, but I'm a centrist. See, the thing with being a centrist is that it's not a side. Some people pick a side. They're left or they're right. But me, I don't pick a side. I'm just correct. I'm a moderate. I mean, it would be crazy to believe anything more extreme or less extreme than what I believe. So just understand, as I'm going through the rest of the video, that I am a raging moderate. I make no apologies for my moderate beliefs. One such belief is that we should cure cancer.
If we call something a moonshot, this is the way Biden talked about, let's say, cancer research. A moonshot in the 60s still meant that you went to the moon. A moonshot now means something completely fictional that's never going to happen. Oh, you need a moonshot for that.
And so the whole time I'm listening to this guy, and the whole time I'm ever listening to any really rich guy, is I'm like, you have so much fucking money, more than you could ever spend in 10 lifetimes.
There is more money here than we could spend in 10 lifetimes.
assuming that they have more money than Walter White, which I think that he does. You should be spending all of that fucking money on cancer research. You could personally buy and fund like 20 hospitals and fill them with the most talented physicians in the world and make sure that there's just hospitals everywhere that there needs to be, and everywhere in the world has medicine. Why don't you do that with all your money and international appeal? These are the kind of questions I would ask Peter Thiel. And that's why he's too afraid to come on my show. Now, Thiel begins to explain some of the counter-arguments to what he's saying, but he doesn't deal with it.
The Trump administration is, I think, to a large degree, giving AI investors a lot of what they wanted in terms of both stepping back and doing public-private partnerships. So it's a zone of progress and governmental engagement. And you are an investor in AI. What do you think you're investing in?
Well, I don't know. There's sort of a lot of layers to this. So I do think I don't know. There's one question we can frame is just how big a thing do I think AI is?
It's this deflation tactic I've talked about, where by bringing up the thing, it sort of feels that the matter has been addressed, and it deflates the tension in the room. Oh, okay, he talked about it. But he didn't talk about it, actually. He just brought it up and then ignored it and moved on to talk about Back to the Future.
There's an epistemological question you can start with on the Back to the Future essays.
Yeah, you mentioned Back to the Future and
Back to the Future.
The original Back to the Future.
But we'll get to Back to the Future. I was trying to think of a good way to explain to Peter Thiel, why it's bad that he exists. Not him as a person, but him in his current position with all that money and power and influence over so many things in the world. And so I figured I would quote one of the great thinkers of our time, Peter Thiel.
We have ever narrower groups of guardians guarding themselves.
Ever narrowing group of guardians guarding themselves. Yeah, that's you, my man. Now, I think he knows this, but someone should make him confront that, right? Like, Ross, fuck you, man. You got to sit with this guy and you just fondled his nether regions. I'm trying not to be too crass. Peter Thiel is a Christian. He kind of laments the condition of youth these days, and they're living in worse economic living standards. They compare their lives to that of their parents, and they're in worse shape.
What are your living standards compared to your parents? If you're a millennial, or how are you doing versus when your boomer parents were 30 years old? How did they do at the time?
And that's because of him and people like him and the systems that allow people like him to persist. Stop persisting, Peter Thiel. Just non-violently hand over your wealth. Hand over the money and no one gets hurt. But we need to talk about something important, which is all these guys being so obsessed with Greta Thunberg.
That's why they're not optimistic. They don't think we've hit some stable, the Greta Future, maybe it can work.
This is the Greta Thunberg. Just to be clear, that's a reference to Greta Thunberg, the activist best known for anti-climate change protests, who, to you, I would say, represents a kind of symbol of a anti-growth, effectively authoritarian, environmentalist-dominated future.
Sure, but we're not there yet. We're not there yet. It'd be like a very, very different society if you really
actually lived in a kind of degrowth, small Scandinavian villages.
I'm not sure it'd be North Korea, but it would be super oppressive.
Now, I have a confession to make, people. I don't really know anything about Greta Thunberg, so I thought about doing some research, clicking around anyway, and then I remembered the conceit. We don't have time for that stuff. I gotta talk about this while that edible is still doing whatever it does. And so instead I am just going to go ahead and brag that I am a grown man that doesn't know anything about this woman other than what I think most people know, which is that she's some kind of climate activist, and she posts stuff on social media and I see it sometimes. I heard about her going to Gaza and being on a ship that got kind of taken by the IDF.
Greta Thunberg's on a boat in the Mediterranean, protesting Israel.
I see headlines, but I don't really know that much about Greta Thunberg. She seems pretty cool. I don't know. But a certain kind of person, according to them, she's basically the Antichrist.
It's the opposite of the picture of Baconian science from the 17th, 18th century, where the Antichrist is like some evil tech genius, evil scientist who invents this machine to take over the world.
Opposite. That's the opposite of what the Antichrist is.
People are way too scared for that. In our world, the thing that has political resonance is the opposite. It is
the thing that has political resonance is we need to stop science. We need to just say stop to this. And this is where, I don't know, in the 17th century, I can imagine a Dr. Strangelove, Edward Teller type person taking over the world. In our world, it's far more likely to be Greta Thunberg.
Okay, I want to suggest a middle ground.
What the fuck is happening in our society right now, guys? Why do you care this much about this one climate activist? Now, hang on, if you're a fan of either of these guys in the comments trying to tell me, well, you need to look into how bad Greta Thunberg is. Well, first of all, I'm just not going to do that. And it's not because I don't care. It'll be out of spite. I just won't do it. And second of all, the person who really needs to be making that argument is Peter Thiel, since he's the one who keeps bringing it up. I don't know if this is coming through at all in the edit, but everything that Peter Thiel says is a load of bullshit.
So there is a cornucopian language. It's the opposite of the picture of Baconian science. It's this daemonium, feels like this sociopathic Malthusian kind of an institution. There was some
I don't know, in the 17th century, I can imagine a Dr. Strangelove,
neocon foreign policy enclave in which people were LARPing.
Totally incomprehensible ping-ponging between buzzwords and pseudo-intellectual things he's digested years ago. So here's the Peter Thiel formula to talking. Somebody asks him a very straightforward question. He goes, geez, oh boy, that's actually really complicated.
You don't feel that climate science is a real science?
There's several different things one could say.
And you are an investor in AI. What do you think you're investing in?
I don't know. There's sort of a lot of.
And he's like, okay, well, let's zoom out. Let's zoom out a little bit. And then he asks a new question.
Now, I have a lot of thoughts on this topic, but sort of one. So there are always three questions you ask about history: what actually happened, and there's a question you get to what should be done about it. But there's also this intermediate question.
And then he starts to describe what some people are saying. You have some people over here saying stuff like this.
And maybe on the optimistic side, it deters China.
And then, no, you got people on the other side saying stuff like this.
And on the pessimistic side, it accelerates them because they know it's now or never if they don't grab Taiwan now.
But what does Peter Thiel believe? Well, he's a moderate, sensible intellectual, of course, so he doesn't believe in anything. He doesn't ever say what he believes in.
But you've personally stopped funding politicians.
I'm schizophrenic on this stuff.
The most influential right-wing intellectual of the last 20 years.
How is this a serious intellectual? He doesn't ever say anything. You can tell that Ross is very comfortable in this little dance that he's doing because it's what these guys do. I mean, you want to hear a real ping pong game, watch Jordan Peterson and Peter Thiel. Or rather, don't.
You can go to a bookstore in Berkeley, buy a book on how to be a witch.
Placebo effect and magic.
And so, but the Girardian alternate story of why the witchcraft trials ended.
Like, obviously, we all know here, us hanging out because we're all cool, we all know that Greta Thunberg is not going to be an authoritarian dictator. The person with the actual influence and resources to pull off some kind of antichrist move is Peter Thiel. Oh, wait, no, but he said it's the opposite of guys like him, actually. We know that. In reality. For people who experience the world in talking points and buzzwords, Greta Thunberg means the left because she thinks that billionaires are bad. If someone's anti-capitalism, that means they're going to be a dictator somehow. But also feudalism would be preferable.
There's some way you can have a feudal society.
I was sitting here trying to figure out how it is that anybody listens to this Peter Thiel fella and thinks he sounds smart.
The guy who made me feel really dumb and almost like a fraud was
Brendan Schaub?
Not Brendan Schaub. Peter Thiel. I was listening to him talk, and I went, I met him at dinner at his house, and I was like, he was talking, and I realized that everything I say is basically an amalgam of the things I've read or heard.
And
this
he's
guy
one of the
thinks,
ones that write those things.
Yeah, he just thinks up things on his own.
Well, he started PayPal with Elon.
Like Jordan Peterson, I get why people think that guy sounds smart. He's like what a dumb person thinks a smart person talks like, is the top voted comment on any YouTube video about Jordan Peterson. He does an impression of intellect. Peter Thiel doesn't even sound smart. He seems confused and non-committal and weaselly. But what if you already knew that this guy was super rich and influential? What if you knew that this guy's whole thing was that monopolies are good and we should just be as outrageously capitalist realistic as we possibly can. What if this guy had his fingers in a lot of different pies and you wanted to be in one of those pies where one of his fingers was? Well, then you would have to take him seriously anyway, whether you wanted to or not. So I'm sure that there is some talent to whatever his deal is. I don't know what it is, though. It's not talking. And I understand the irony of me saying that in the most incomprehensible video I've ever made. So because I'm just going off of notes, there's not a really great transition to this next part. Alzheimer's.
You know, if we look at biotech, something like dementia, Alzheimer's, we've made zero progress in 40 to 50 years. People are completely stuck on beta amyloids. It's obviously not working. It's just some kind of a stupid racket where the people are just reinforcing themselves.
This one really bothered me. I really found myself grossed out by this. Now, I didn't go to some woke university like Peter Thiel. I just went to a community college a couple years to get my medical assisting thing. What did I go to school for? Holy shit. Certification. I had to do a project on Alzheimer's. My great-grandmother had it. And funny words do kind of stand out to me. So I remember this amyloid thing. Beta amyloids are like a plaque that builds up in your brain. Okay, and so then obviously I realized I should actually look this up. I figured I should go to a source that everyone can agree on both sides of the aisle, for non-centrists out there. So this is from the National Institute of Health. This is NIH. This is Trump administration approved, and I actually wondered if I should be conspiratorial about this. So I went to the Wayback Machine and looked and made sure that it hadn't been changed after Trump took office, and no. Alzheimer's disease pathogenesis is wisely believed to be driven by the production and deposition of the beta amyloid peptide. Now, I didn't really understand what that meant. The National Institute on Aging says people with dementia sometimes simultaneously experience a number of vascular issues, problems that affect blood vessels, such as beta amyloid deposits in brain arteries. So this buildup of amyloid in your brain has something to do with dementia. What's the point of that? Peter Thiel is just like that, but that's fake.
Dementia, Alzheimer's, we've made zero progress in 40 to 50 years.
There hasn't been any advancements, and that's all a stupid racket.
People are completely stuck on beta amyloids. It's obviously not working. It's just some kind of a stupid racket.
And it's obviously not working. Well, what? Like, what does that even mean? People are completely stuck on beta amyloids. What the fuck do you know about this, Peter Thiel? Are you a fucking whatever kind of person you would need to be to know that? Like, here's what you get on this channel. I'll just fully admit to you, I don't know fucking jack shit about science in any way, shape, or form. I don't know what kind of scientist would deal with beta amyloids, okay? But I'm also not going to pretend that I know. Peter Thiel isn't just going to pretend that he knows what beta amyloids are and how they work on the human brain. But he's also going to insist that the entire field of research over the past 40 or 50 years is bullshit. This according to the guy who gave money to PayPal. Like, what the fuck kind of qualification does he have to talk about this at all?
Peter Thiel automatically connected in most people's eyes to the greatest people amongst us, the people that have contributed the most to society and science and art and peace.
Like James Bond times 100.
I understand Peter Thiel is probably smarter than me in a lot of ways, but I took a little look at his credentials, and it turns out he's not a doctor and doesn't have any kind of special knowledge of the human brain. He's just a money guy who has money and gets money for giving money. We also know that he's not a professor or teacher of any kind, because he can barely talk and form a sentence. And his greatest enemy in the whole world is a Swedish girl with an Instagram account. Big, strong man whose ideas we should take seriously, according to Ross.
You're very welcome. Thanks for being here.
Like, if I sounded in any way coherent about that at all, it's because I looked up some shit, and I found this article called Peter Thiel is utterly wrong about Alzheimer's. He probably knows and he doesn't care. From senior news editor Avery Ellis. I'm really giving you all the credits here. So she's talking about this interview. She acknowledges PD Boy's comment that they've made zero progress in 40 to 50 years. It's a pretty bold claim, she says. It's also completely untrue. There was no treatment 40 or 50 years ago for Alzheimer's disease. Sterling Johnson, a professor of geriatrics and gerontology at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, told Ed Gadget, "What we've been able to do in the last 20 years has actually been pretty extraordinary. We've developed markers that helped us identify when this disease starts using the I think that's a typo, using the amyloid markers. We know that the disease actually begins 20 years before the symptoms do, and that is a critical thing to know if we are going to prevent the disease." So that's cool, but not according to Peter Thiel. That didn't even happen. And so the point of that is that Peter Thiel is a fucking moron. And here's how you know he's a fucking moron, is that all he's really upset about when it comes down to it is that he is sad that his future isn't like future Futurama, the cartoon.
If Christianity promised you a physical resurrection, science was not going to succeed unless it promised you the exact same thing. But I don't know. I remember 1999, 2000, when we were running PayPal. One of my co-founders, Luke Nosek, he was into Alcor and Cryonics, and people should freeze themselves. And we had one day where we took the whole company to a freezing party. A Tupperware party. People sell Tupperware policies at a freezing party.
What? A freezing party, and Ross acts like he knows, but I don't know what a freezing party is. I grew up in the 90s. I remember Tupperware parties. What does the freezing part have to do with anything?
Was it just your heads? What was going to be frozen?
You could get a full body or just a head.
The head was cheaper.
It was disturbing when the dot matrix printer didn't quite work, and so the freezing policies couldn't be printed out. But in retrospect, this was still
technological stagnation once again, right?
Okay, so am I crazy, or is he talking about going to basically the place from Futurama and they offered to cryogenically freeze his head? From Smithsonian Magazine, 200 frozen heads and bodies await revival at this Arizona cryonics facility. This is the Alcor company that Peter Thiel was talking about. Well, there's some killjoys here, quoted in the Smithsonian Magazine article. People who do not believe in our ability to live in the cartoon Futurama. Clive Cohen, a neuroscientist at King's College London in England, tells MIT Technology Review's Lori Clark that cryonics is, quote, a hopeless aspiration that reveals an appalling ignorance of biology. Now, this couldn't possibly be true of Peter Thiel. He is a smart science man who just happens to be a doomsday Christian. Far be it from me to suggest that a doomsday Christian might have an appalling ignorance of biology, but I'm just saying that maybe Peter Thiel is a fucking idiot psycho.
But it's also a symptom of the decline, because in 1999, this was not a mainstream view, but there was still a fringe boomer view where they still believed they could live forever. And that was the last generation. So I'm always anti-boomer, but maybe there's something we've lost even in this fringe boomer narcissism, where there were at least a few boomers who still, believed science would cure all their diseases.
So Peter Thiel's ideology, if I'm following all this correctly, is that the future has been very disappointing for him personally, because he thought we would live in the future from Back to the Future 2, and we would have flying cars and floating skateboards. And it sucks that we don't live in that world. And he was under the distinct impression that he would be able to cryogenically freeze himself and thus never die. Immortality is what he was promised, and he couldn't find it in science, or at least he hasn't yet, so he is retreating to scripture. Is that something an intellectual would do? I don't know.
Back to Future 2 was, I think, 1985 to 2015, which is now a decade in the past. And that's where you had flying cars, and the 2015 future is wildly divergent from
the 2015 future did have Biff Tannen as a Donald Trump-like figure in some kind of power. So it had some kind of prescience, but yeah.
Ross, no, stop. That was smart what you said. I actually have always wanted people to bring this up more often.
The big noticeable thing is just how
great work, Ross. Just let him keep rambling about this shit. Now, here's where we get to give some good job points to Ross, because he actually does finally stop Peter Thiel, and he's like, hey, okay, what do you mean, though?
So yes, we need to take way more risk in that department.
Well, I want to ask, to keep us in the concrete, I want to stay with that example for a minute and ask, okay, what does that mean, saying we need to take more risks in anti-aging research? Does it mean that the FDA has to step back and say anyone who has a new treatment for Alzheimer's can, go ahead and sell it on the open market? Like, what is risk in the medical space look like?
Okay, well done. I actually thought that was good. But then Peter Thiel still evades, and Ross, I don't know if he doesn't notice or he just doesn't care to redirect. He's like, what do you mean by taking risks? And Peter Thiel just like, well, what I'm saying is we got to take a lot of risks.
What is risk in the medical space look like?
Yeah, you would take a lot more risk. If you have some fatal disease, there probably are a lot more risks you can take. There are a lot more risks the researchers can take.
Well, that didn't really tell us anything, but he just gets a free ride, Peter Thiel, because Ross is like, actually, I won't press him on that. Let's just keep broing out. This guy's really smart, and I talked up how smart he is, and I want him to think that I'm smart, because I want to be invited to one of his cool parties where he talks about the Antichrist.
You have been giving talks recently about the concept of the Antichrist.
We should probably get to that. I've been recording for a long time. I obviously had a lot of thoughts. Well, I can tell you right now, the Antichrist gets brought up 26 times. 25 if we don't count Ross's little intro. I've been working on this video for like a couple months now, and it includes a little bit about these talks that Peter Thiel was giving about the Antichrist. I'm mentioning that because it will definitely be used in an upcoming video. Stay tuned. I will talk about it. And, you know, I won't mention this because it's a scripted video, and I won't mention this little conversation we had here, but you and I, we can share a little look. The point is the Antichrist.
There's also a very macroscopic question that you're interested in that, you know, we'll pull on the religion thread a little bit here.
Hey, Ross, you don't have to say that you're pulling on the thread. You don't have to, like, brag about the thing that you're there to do.
You have been giving talks recently about the concept of the Antichrist, which is a Christian concept, an apocalyptic concept. What does that mean to you? What is the Antichrist?
How much time do we have?
I've been watching a lot of interviews with guys like this, and here's how you know that someone's about to spew some bullshit is they go, how much time do you have? Ooh, Ross is like, yeah, obviously this is the biggest interview of my career when you think about it, so I'm just going to sit here as long as you want.
We've got as much time as you have to talk about the Antichrist.
All right, this is a clip-heavy video, right? And, I mean, that's good because then there's something to watch, because I know I'm not going to put a ton of effort on the screen. But I found this answer to be pretty incomprehensible when he was talking. Here, I'll give you a little taste.
All right, well, I could talk about it for a long time. I think there's always a question.
Yeah, well, it's like that the whole time, and he talks for minutes on end. So what I think I will do is I would like to read you the transcript, so that, because sometimes I think it's a little clearer if you can actually just read somebody's words right there. Okay, so that is the question, and Ross says, take all the time you need. And Peter Thiel's answer is, all right, well, I could talk about it for a long time. But, you know, I think there's always been a question, you know, how do we articulate, you know, some of these existential risks, some of the challenges we have, and they're all framed as sort of runaway dystopian science text. Well, wait, there's no way that's what he says.
They're all framed as sort of runaway dystopian science text.
Oh, he did say that. What? I don't understand that. There's a risk of nuclear war. There's a risk of environmental disaster, maybe something specific like climate change, although there are lots of other ones we've come up with. There's a risk of, you know, bioweapons. You have all the different sci-fi scenarios, obviously. There are certain types of risks with AI. We should also talk about the risk of another type of a bad singularity, which I would describe as the one world totalitarian state, because I would say the political solution, the default political solution people have for all these existential risks is one world governance. You know, what do you do about nuclear weapons? We have a United Nations with real teeth that controls them, and they're controlled by an international political order. Okay, well, this is pretty fascinating because and you didn't know this going in, but this actually does have to do with Jehovah's Witnesses after all.
Yahweh, Jehovah, the Lord of hosts.
Now, not just Jehovah's Witnesses, but all evangelical Christian religion types have conspiratorial beliefs about the United Nations playing an important role in Armageddon. Growing up, I believed as a Jehovah's Witness that the United Nations was Babylon the great prostitute foretold in Armageddon. Nope, Revelation.
The default political solution people have for all these existential risks is one world governance. You know, what do you do about nuclear weapons? We have a United Nations with real teeth that controls them.
What about nations empowering the United Nations, handing over their personal political power? So the United Nations has more power. It has teeth, as it were. Teeth.
This religious doomsday narrative intersects pretty perfectly with the New World Order conspiracy theory, which I have also talked about in previous videos, but it is about a totalitarian one-world government. Now, the irony here, of course, is that Peter Thiel wants to build a one-world government. He believes in the concept of the network state, and he wants to be on the world's board of directors. So this is really cynical lying to weaponize conspiracy theories to trick people for money and gain, although not even money, because he's got all that he'll ever need. So why is he doing this? power. I don't know if he really believes this. He's introducing all these concepts in the hypothetical, like, well, people talk about it in terms like this, but what do you believe? I mean, literally the question was, what do you believe? And all Peter Thiel's been doing is explaining what other people believe and what societies have believed throughout history. That's a very convenient way to never have to say what you believe. Now, I guess if you're a gullible rube, you would take this to think that Peter Thiel is very smart. He has to dive so deep into history to even begin to explain his ideas. But that actually is not a sign that you are smart. That's not to say that everything in the world is simple. But if somebody says, what does the Antichrist mean? And you have to do this.
We want more than cross-dressing or changing your sex organs. We want you to be able to change your heart and change your mind and change your whole body. And then Orthodox Christianity, by the way, the critique Orthodox Christianity has of this is these things don't go far enough.
I think that you're bullshitting. I think you might be finding out in real time that you don't really know what you believe. It's all just floaty buzzwords in your head. This tangled knot of Arthurian legends and Back to the Future and big pharma being bad, but not for the reasons that you and I probably think it's bad. It's in this thicket in his head, and he's just trying to trudge through it.
In our world, it's far more likely to be Greta Thunberg.
I think this is why the rich and powerful get obsessed with the concept of mind viruses, the woke mind virus. They become these moralistic culture war people because for their own self-perception, they can't allow themselves to believe that money is part of the problem, that wealth is part of the problem, at the very least obscene wealth. Once you have risen to the level of Peter Thiel, you obviously understand that your every action has like existential implications. I don't think the world should be this way, but it is this way. When Elon Musk tweets, it can shift the stock market of like 3 different companies. Now, I don't even really understand the stock market, and I don't know if I think they should exist, but we live in a world where the stock market is important, and thus Elon Musk is very important, and so it makes a lot of sense to me that he would go crazy. That he would get addicted to drugs and lose his fucking mind and become totally self-obsessed until he eventually overdoses, probably. Because having that amount of power is actually very bad for your brain and for the whole world, for society. But he's not allowed to think that, is he? I mean, unless he wanted to really, really change his life around. And you know, part of turning your life around for these guys would be admitting to crimes and possibly going to jail. The only reason why they're not in jail is because of their money and resources and the people and systems that they own. Well, if a person like that was going to take a look at society and be like, all right, what are the main problems? If they realized that the main problem was wealth, inequality, and inequality all around, like the fact that we actually do have the money and resources to solve things like world hunger and stuff, but we just would have to build a better world to do it, that sounds like work. And they did not get to be billionaires to have to be doing a bunch of fucking work. Their job is sitting down doing this shit. And like, yeah, that's what I'm doing right now, but this is my free time. I also do have to work a real job. And also, I think if this counts as a thing that can be a job for money, what I'm doing is at least as valuable as this. So psychologically, I'm saying they can't allow themselves to accept that class is the problem and not, well, race. Well, hey, if race is the problem, that's something that they maybe could solve with money or spend their time messing around with instead of having to do real work to change the world for the better. If the problem with the world is Greta Thunberg's and woke ideology, whatever that means, that's a battle they can fight with the money that they have instead of us. So I think that he needs to do some introspection here. And then, nope. You know, comedy is legal again, but I was about to say something that I realized I actually think might not be legal again.
Legalize comedy!
But sort of one question is, and this was a plot hole in all these Antichrist books people wrote, how does the Antichrist take over the world? It's he gives these demonic, hypnotic speeches and people just fall for it. And so it's this plot hole.
Again, it's the opposite. That's a plot hole. I know it does kind of sound like he just described a Peter Thiel type person, somebody who's able to captivate millions of powerful people hypnotically, but that is, again, a plot hole and not at all what the Antichrist would be like. And Ross is like, totally. I totally agree.
It's this daemonium.
Right. It's totally, it's implausible.
It's a very implausible plot hole.
Right.
Great work, Ross.
And then something like this, you know, is also, you know, what do we do about AI? And we need global compute governance. We need, you know, a one world government to control all the computers.
And then something like this, is also, what do we do about AI? And we need global compute governance. We need, a one world Well, what are you saying right now? Are you saying that you think that needs to happen? Or are you saying that other people are saying that? What the fuck is happening with Peter Thiel? So he's saying that something like that would be bad. In that if something like this would exist, it makes him wonder if we're going from out of the frying pan and into the fire. But that is what he's building with Palantir. So is Peter Thiel just an evil psychopath who knows what he's doing? Is he Lex Luthor? And you have to say it like that. It's more fun to say it like Luthor. Or is he more like Ed Norton in Glass Onion? Is he just a fucking stupid guy? Or is he like Greta Thunberg, who, as we all know, is the most existential threat to the planet?
So the atheist philosophical framing is one world or none.
What does what? Like, I'm an atheist. I don't even know if I believe in a one world government. I don't know. Why are you asking me shit like this? I don't think I should have to worry about such things. I would like to not have existential problems. I'd like to be able to just kind of do my thing and hang out and contribute to society in some way. But, probably continue to do this. I watched this and started making this because I thought I'd be able to decode what Peter Thiel was saying. He's not really saying anything. He's got a lot of floaty ideas in his head that are probably more solid in some writings we'll find after he kills himself. Just kidding, that was a joke. Comedy's legal again. I don't know, he just seems like the kind of guy who would have a notebook made of human skin that he would scrawl his thoughts in, and he writes his theology in pig's blood. Ross just picks up the ball and runs with this as if he has totally understood everything Peter Thiel was saying. I'm just telling you, reading the transcript, Ross did not understand that. It's not understandable.
Right. But I think to get to that point, you need one of the accelerationist apocalyptic scenarios to start to play out. So don't you think you need your worst case scenario to involve some burst of progress that is then tamed and used to impose stagnant totalitarianism? You can't just get there from where we are right now.
I think what he's saying is that you could actually enact totalitarianism using AI and so forth, but it doesn't feel like you could get there right now. Like, probably you couldn't do it in 2 years or something. So, Peter Thiel, this is Ross talking, isn't there going to have to be some burst of progress in technology in order to enact your apocalyptic scenario, I think is what he said. And then I zoom out and I'm like, what the fuck are we talking about? Like, what? This is unacceptable that Ross has just totally accepted this framing. I mean, he's not a journalist, he's an opinion columnist, so I guess his job is just to spew bullshit. And hey, him and I both, although I can afford chairs that are closer to the ground. But, he had a real chance to ask him some clear-cut questions. And this is what frustrates me about this conversation. And I think it's because of something that Luthen Rail said in Andor, one of the sacred texts.
Might as well wear a sign that says, I promise to disappoint you.
People are disappointing. And Ross, you're disappointing. You got to talk to the guy who made Andor, and first of all, you made an ass out of yourself doing it. Second of all, you clearly didn't learn anything from the fucking show. We're in it, baby, whether you like it or not, and you could have played an interesting little moment in the revolution here. The fact that Peter Thiel would be willing to come on your podcast is actually a shameful thing. This man should not feel comfortable going on your show. And so I think the onus is on you, if he does feel comfortable going on that show, to do some introspection and, try. I'm saying zoom out a little bit, Ross. Hat. God damn it, Douthit. This is not a bit. I cannot remember his name. On some level, you have to understand that this is a big deal that you're sitting down with this guy, and you had the opportunity to really hold the screws to him. I can't do that. It would be untoward. I'd get in trouble. I might lose my job. Yeah, you might. That would be good, actually. That would be cool. We would like you then. We'd make a video about how you were the coolest guy ever and how you actually were smart all those years. And I wouldn't have made the joke about the chair. But humans are disappointing. And, we got 2 disappointing humans right here. Now, Ross and Peter Thiel would hate to hear this, but I no longer believe in the Bible or our Lord Jesus Christ. But because I grew up religious, the Bible still has a lot of meaning to me as a work of fiction. And I genuinely don't mean that as a dig. Fiction is way more powerful to me than nonfiction, just generally. But Peter Thiel is not exactly an Orthodox Christian, and Ross actually kind of calls him out for being heretical.
Yeah, the promise of Christianity in the end is you get the perfected body and the perfected soul through God's grace, And the person who tries to do it on their own with a bunch of machines is likely to end up as a dystopian character.
Well, it's... Let's articulate this.
And you can have a heretical form of Christianity, that says something else.
So while we're both being heretics, Peter Thiel, I would like to recommend to you, first of all, I'm so glad that you found my video. I don't know how your journey led you here, but I'm glad you're here to hear my Bible recommendation for you. Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verse, which one is it? Now, in biblical tradition, this was written by King Solomon. I don't think it was actually written by him, according to scholars, but that's the way we understood it as biblical literalists. That's the story it's telling. He was a king, he had absolutely everything, a gajillion wives, all the sex he ever wanted, Peter Thiel. So Solomon said, I, the preacher, have been king over Israel and Jerusalem, and I applied my heart to seek and to search out by wisdom all that is done under heaven. It is an unhappy business that God has given to the children of man to be busy with. I have seen everything that is done under the sun, and behold, all is vanity, and a striving after the wind. What is crooked cannot be made straight, and what is lacking cannot be counted. Now the best part comes in verse 17, where Solomon says, and I applied my heart to know wisdom and to know madness and folly. I think Peter Thiel can relate to that part. He clearly wants to understand all the smart stuff and all the crazy stuff and hold all these ideas in his head at the same time. But one of God's best buddies, King Solomon, I mean, he made it into his book, said, I perceived that this also is but a striving after wind. And here I suppose I can speak a little positively about my JW growing up tradition. What's the J stand for in JW again?
Jehovah, the Lord of Hosts.
That was the guy I worshipped, right? This obviously sounds pretty fatalistic, like, oh my God, nothing matters. And you can also see how Peter Thiel would like verse 18, for in much wisdom is much vexation, and he who increases knowledge increases sorrow. I think that this is actually the appeal of Peter Thiel. I wish that his name didn't rhyme with so many things. To a certain class of pretentious dipshit, Peter Thiel presents as a man burdened with knowledge, burdened with glorious purpose, as, who said that great line? Oh, right, the demon guy.
Peter Thiel had a party at his house, and he brought over the guy who wrote Chariots of the God. No, we all had like a lunch around the table. He has these like power dinners and power lunches. They're really cool.
Let's
where
go.
He brings over interesting people and everyone has conversations.
That's the dream.
I went to one of the dinners at his house, and then I went to one of the lunches at his house.
For us as Jehovah's Witnesses, this wasn't a bad verse. It wasn't about how there's no point to life and how, if you're so smart, you're going to be so sad. What it was for us was a lesson in seeking power. The whole thing with King Solomon was this was a guy who got everything. He got all of the worldly pleasures humanly possible. He reached Peter Thiel levels of power and influence, and yet he realized, after having achieved it all, that it was all vanity and striving after the wind, that he just wasn't a fundamentally happy person. He had learned a lot of things, but he hadn't actually grown close to God, and that made him sad. Now, I don't think that the Bible is the literal word of God or anything, so I don't think it matters how you interpret this text, but saying this because I actually still think that's true. I don't have that faith anymore, but I carry that bit of wisdom with me. I cherish it, because what I see when I see Peter Thiel and frankly Ross Douthat is sad, small men. These are grown-ass, married, adult dudes. And one of their primary concerns in life is that some 20-year-old Swedish young woman thinks that they suck. They are so terrified of youth. They are so terrified of the unknown. This entire conversation is about fear and what we should be afraid of, more than other things that we should also be afraid of, but what should we fear more? Well, that's a fucking crazy way to live your life. I do not fear these men. I don't pity them either. They need to go away. Not to jail even, just away. Just stop it. Just get out of here, and enough with you. I mean, he's a gay married guy who believes in a conservative reading of the Bible, so he must hate himself. And it's frankly very concerning that he has any power at all and is not instead in some kind of institution getting mental health treatments. I think that Peter Thiel should be put in a hospital. I mean, listen, it's Peter Thiel. It'll be the nicest fucking hospital ever. It'll be like he's on vacation, but he'll get the treatment he needs. And Ross, I mean, this grimy little cockroach is gonna survive till the end of this thing, I bet. But let us never forget that he just totally shot the chair in this interview, and maybe that's why he's sitting like that. Found it at the end. Brought it full circle at the end, thanks, and I really thought this might be a short video, and now I have to actually make it, and it's going to be annoying.
Hey, motherfuckers. The name Peter Berg Peter Thiel, the name was taken from the name of the Egyptian wolf god, one of whom's name was
Yeah, this is what I'm talking about.
The name Peter Thiel automatically connected in most people's eyes to the greatest people amongst us, the people that have contributed the most to society and science and art and peace.
Like James Bond times 100.
Also has an enormous erection.
It's very hard. And Nobel Prize.
Nobel Prize for medicine. So you think that the motivation of imitation is
tech stagnation,
reputation,
meditation.
I think you're right.
I think Joe Rogan sucks cock.
Oh my God, this is my reputation. This is how people think about me. I have to do something to turn this around.